much. I just about got convicted about 3 weeks ago when I did this presentation in a different format to a group of senior HR people about abolishing performance appraisals. You can imagine how that went down, like a lead balloon, apart from one organisation. I can tell you afterwards in their groups. 2 questions. Hands up anybody who's a manager and loves to do performance appraisals. Either you're not managers or you love to do it, right? 1, maybe 2. Anybody who's an employee who loves being performance appraised? 0. Interesting. Right, I could actually cut out half the talk and go straight to the end, but it might be worth reminding ourselves why performance management and appraisal are actually so bad. Now, that's not to say the intentions or the purpose and functions of performance appraisals are necessarily bad. It's just the way they seem to be implemented. But it's the thinking, it's the assumptions, the beliefs and their application that I think are particularly bad for employees, managers and for organisations. W. Deming called performance appraisal one of his 7 deadly sins. They're that bad. He called them destructive to organisations, inhibiting quality and productivity. I have to read these because there's a lot of them. In practice, it was a disease that annihilates long-term planning, demobilises teamwork, nourishes rivalry in politics, leaving people bitter, crushed, bruised, battered, desolate, etc. So really bad. Really damning indictment, and that was reflected in a recent report entitled Performance Management and the New Workplace Tyranny. So it was a recent report conducted by Professor Phil Taylor at Strathclyde University. Because what he studied, looking at a number of organisations, said it was no longer the benign, enlightened expression of shared interest that a lot of the HR literature, and I've read all the damn things, still presents. He said it's exactly the opposite. He said it somehow has morphed into something leading to increasing levels of stress, distress, mental health issues, sickness, absence, and more worryingly, and I've seen it at first hand, increased levels of bullying in the organisation, equally damning. Now, a few people I ask about performance management say it's perfect, but the only response I get is, well, we can tweak it. The response I got from this executive forum was, well, surely we can't, eliminate performance appraisals because we'll be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. My response was, well, maybe the baby has outlived the size of the bath. Maybe it's time the baby gets out of the bath. Now, a lot of my experience of performance appraisals is as an HR director, HR manager, 30 years, we tweak performance appraisal systems every 2 years. Why? Because it's not working. But rather than eliminating it, we think, we'll put in another level. Instead of 5 levels, put in 4. 2 years later, we put it back up to 5 again. It doesn't need a fix. It needs abolishing altogether. And a lot of these assumptions are based and articulated in a book I brought with me called Abolishing Performance Appraisals by American writers Cohens and Jenkins. And they systematically outline all of the assumptions and why they're wrong. So let me give you a couple of examples. 1, the appraisal process objectively and reliably evaluates and assesses performance, individual performance. The problem here, of course, is that the appraisal is fraught with bias and rate of error. No matter what, you will always get bias built in. Secondly, and this is something Deming touched on, if anybody's read Deming, you'll know exactly what this is about, which is that Deming proved that when you look at the performance of an organisation, 95% is due to the system, i.e. the design of the work. What does that leave? 5% is due to the individual. People are not in control of their work and how they do things. They're influential, but not in control. The design of the work is what should be managed. One of the things I came across, for example, is how many organisations place people on a distribution curve in terms of performance. I came across an organisation, it's quoted in this report as well, forcing managers to evaluate and rate their people and put on the distribution curve. No matter how well you performed, somebody had to be at the bottom. No matter how you performed, somebody had to be at the top and everybody else was in the middle. That sounds logical. As somebody asked an HR director, okay, what if I had 5 Einsteins in my organisation? How would you expect me to rate them? Would you expect me to put them in a distribution curve? Aye, of course you would have to do. All right. What if I had 5 idiots? Would I praise them exactly the same way? HR director walked away. So that shows you the obnoxious rating systems that we tend to have in organisations. So I think performance management actually leads to a real scourge in organisations and leaves really people damaged, and there are alternative ways of doing it. So what kind of alternatives could you have? Well, Deming said, read Peter Scholtes. Now Peter Scholtes is a management consultant who wrote a book about what managers could do differently, and there's a whole chapter in there about what you could do differently. And all of the talks we talked about here, about not setting targets, particularly is to focus the organisation on what's the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? If the problem is about people needing feedback, we'll put in a feedback system. Don't appraise their performance. Wrong assumptions. If your issue is about problem solving, supply the employees with mechanisms for solving problems. That's how you improve performance. So the book that I mentioned, Abolishing Performance Appraisals, gives actually a good 16-step process of how to look at your assumptions, turn them over and come up with assumptions that are true, and then put in proper mechanisms. The whole point was involving employees in the design of that system. Finally, at this executive forum I mentioned, the one organisation that turned out, and it was interesting, amongst 30 people, and these are director level HR people, who said, when I said abolish appraisals, everybody said, nah, you can't. One person put up her hand. She says, well, I'm a director of HR at the SQA. You know what the SQA? Scottish Qualifications Authority. Yeah, Scottish Qualifications Authority. She said, we abolished them. You could have heard a pin drop, and the jaws just dropped as well. People could not believe an organisation, public sector essentially, could get rid of appraisals. Well, the conversation from that point went on to, well, how did you do it? What did you do? Exactly what the book said. Analyse what problem you're trying to solve, then put in the mechanism to solve it. And you don't need appraisals. Performance, she said, in the organisation has improved rapidly. Thank you.